Continuing with our theme for Oktoberfest and German foods, we're going to make Rotkohl, which is a classic sweet and sour cabbage that's served with many German dishes. The first thing we're going to do is assemble all of our ingredients for making the red cabbage. We're going to use a 1/4 cup of bacon fat, 2/3 of a cup of chopped onions, 2/3 of a cup of white sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper, 2 whole cloves, 2 whole bay leaves, 2/3 of a teaspoon of allspice. Allspice is not all spices, it's individual spice, it just happens to be named allspice. We're going to use 2 cups of water, 2/3 of a cup of red wine vinegar, and many recipes call for putting apples in at the beginning. I'm going to peel and cut the apples into 8ths and put them at the end. I like the apple flavor, but I also don't like the apples to be totally cooked away. I've set up here on my stove cast iron enameled Dutch oven. We're going to put our 1/4 cup of bacon fat into the Dutch oven. Let it become liquid. Once it becomes warm, we're going to take and sweat our onions, which means that we're just going to cook them till they become soft. We don't want them to really be colored. You can see the bacon fat in there. It's just starting to melt. We can add our onions at this point. And I'm going to take and stir those with a heat-resistant spatula. Bacon fat gives it a nice flavor. This takes about 10 minutes to sweat the onions. In the meantime, while we're sweating the onions, what I have here is a red cabbage that is approximately 2.5 pounds. That when I get done cutting this, it's going to be roughly 2 pounds is what I require for the recipe. I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to remove the coarse outer leaves. But they're tough and they won't cook up when you are cooking the cabbage. And this gets rid of the tough leaves. And what I've done is I've cut these in half. I'm going to 1/4 them. And then if you turn the cabbage over, you can see the core. And it's very easy at this point to cut out the core. And what we're going to do is we're going to shred all the cabbage to put in our Dutch oven. This cabbage could be shredded in a food processor, but I like it coarse, so I'm going to do it by hand. I don't want it to be like the canned red cabbage that you see in the grocery store. This is a real homemade recipe. And if you'll notice, I'm using a Chinese cleaver for cutting this. The cleaver has a nice weight to it, and it seems to cut this up very nicely. Now that I've sweated the onions over a medium heat, I'm going to add all of my cabbage to the pan. And I'm going to saute the cabbage a little bit in the bacon fat with the onions, just to soften it up a little bit. I do that over a medium heat. While the cabbage is beginning to cook, I'm going to take my water, vinegar, sugar, and spices and mix all together. Some people will add some juniper berries to this. Juniper berries are used in the marinades for the sauerbraten, and you know, it can be a nice addition to the cabbage. I add my salt. Let me check on the cabbage, see how it's cooked. Give it a nice stir, make sure it's all coated with all the bacon fat. So let this cook for about 10 minutes. Now that our cabbage is freshly cooked, we'll take our water, vinegar, spice mixture, and pour that in over the cabbage. Stir that up. We're going to bring this to a boil. Then we're going to reduce it to a simmer, cover it, and cook until the cabbage is tender. Once the cabbage is tender, we'll add the apples, let them cook for a couple of minutes, and then we'll be all done. We do want to remove the bay leaves though before we do serve the cabbage, because the bay leaves are pretty unappetizing when you find them on your plate. My cabbages are pretty well cooked now. I'm going to peel the 4 apples. I will cut them into 8 sections, core the apple, and this will go into my cabbage mixture and cook until they're just heated through. I don't want them to be completely cooked into mush. These are Macintosh apples that I'm using, but you can use a tartar or sweeter apple depending on your taste. Well, the apples are cooked down, and there you have it, the Rotkohl, and that can be served with your sauerbraten and spätzle. And there you have it, a complete German dinner: sauerbraten, spätzle, and Rotkohl, red cabbage.